one of the things that helps you ask for help is when you have very good self-knowledge, or high self-awareness.
Learning to swim is about learning from others. Be the author of your own story, not a character in somebody else's story. Get inspired by others to take action. Learn how to set goals to exceed your own expectations. So often the answer that you are looking for is right in front of you. On Learning to Swim, we highlight those answers through storytelling. I just want to say welcome.
Thanks.
And let me share a bit about you. I have known Phelps for, gosh, I don't even want to say how long, a long time. And it is so, but what I didn't know about you is I didn't know that really the bulk of your career has been spent in leadership roles with growth businesses. So you've been working with founders and owners and management, all to look at how to increase and sustain value over time. And you also have worked in the realm of family-owned enterprises, which is its own beast, right, so to speak.
Yeah, beast may be the best word.
and it's and in particular to address growth and transition issues. And you know a lot about this because you have experience with your own family's business. And so that is, you have a wealth of knowledge from that firsthand. And outside of work, you have 2 daughters, and you do, and so you were sharing that you're interested in childhood education and youth sports. You actually coach. You've served as a coach and volunteered at a local school or your local school. And you have, and you also volunteer in your free time too. And I really like this because you have an interest in working with nonprofits, helping them professionalize their organization so that they can improve outcomes and services for whom they serve. So again, welcome. And I'm going to jump right in. You don't know what the questions are, but so talk to me about what does resilience mean to you?
It's funny. The first thing that comes to mind when you say resilience is perseverance, which is maybe just another, which is probably not a definition of resilience, but I think that without perseverance, it's kind of hard to be resilient. A lot of resilience, I believe, comes from just kind of keeping at it and trying to keep going and kind of knowing that you can move through something, and often you have to move through something rather than move around something or avoid something. So, I mean, I think that resilient people usually have a level of perseverance that helps them kind of get through that. I think they also, tend, I think, to be resilient. I don't know. You asked me what resilience means, but I think,
what does it look like to you, or how?
I think a resilient person, which may not be resilience, also has maybe some aspects of, a big picture and an ability to understand that sometimes setbacks are either minor or temporary. Again, that might play into kind of some of the perseverance. I mean, those are things that kind of come top of mind. I don't know if you want me to go in more of a direction on one of those.
Well, so I have a question for you because I agree with you on all fronts. And, part of, I think, so how do you, especially since you coach, so I think of that as being such a great forum for at least planting the seed of resilience in young people, because as you mentioned, in some ways it's easier to be resilient or to remain resilient or persistent when you do have kind of a little bit more history to draw from and experience to draw from, where you can kind of zoom back a little bit. But as a young person, or what do you see within your own daughters? Like how do we plant that seed, and how do you see that kind of talk to me
Yeah,
a
well,
little
so
bit
it's
more about
interesting you
that.
say that. So when when you bring it up as in the form of like of younger people or kids for that matter, or coaching, as you mentioned, this is actually something I've talked about with my wife a lot. I don't know that we're very good at doing it with our kids, but you talk about the helicopter parents now and everything. And one of the problems is that one of the problems that seems that comes out of that is that kids are not as resilient. And most of that is because they haven't had a chance to fail, or they haven't had a chance to take on um, either activities or some of their own they haven't had that personal growth, which actually allows resilience. They haven't had, they haven't been given kind of their own free kind of reign, right?
Yeah.
So, the old saying of like, give somebody, don't give them enough rope, but not enough to hang themselves with, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
and so that is a challenge, I think, with kids, especially, is like kind of understanding what kids or younger people, or really actually anybody, I think, is
Yeah.
if you want to help somebody grow, giving them enough responsibility that they feel that they have ownership over something, but not so much that they're overwhelmed. And that's kind of, the magic is somewhere in there, and probably a good coach or a good manager, or a good mentor, is somebody who helps them push the limits, but doesn't give somebody so much that they get so overwhelmed that they can't kind of function, right? Or that they
Right.
make a mistake that it's much harder to recover from, right? Ideally, you want to disseminate the decision making process, because if you have a hierarchical decision making process where one person at the top is making every decision, you're not going to get anywhere, um,
Right.
or it's going to feel like a totalitarian organization,
Yeah.
so you just can't function very well, and you certainly can't grow very fast, right? So you want to find the right people who want to take on those extra responsibilities and can make those decisions. And when they can't make those decisions, can either find other people to help them make them, or kind of push up the chain and say, I need help making this, and that's the way I see it. But
Well, and I think that you bring up a really good point on the fact that one of, you know, d- being resilient and creating success, or even kind of the decision making process and how we do that, it doesn't, it's not meant to it's not a solo adventure, right? I mean, part of, I think, kind of the best, or one of the things that's nice also about kind of being older or having more experience is recognizing the value of asking questions and asking for help.
no, without a doubt. I mean, well, you said kind of two different, I hear two different things there. So asking questions and asking for help, right? Which are not
Right.
necessarily the same thing, but can be related.
Correct.
And certainly when you see somebody who's really good at diving into the problem, all right, whether it is a personal problem or a business problem, it's usually somebody who's really good at asking questions, really good at listening to the answers that they receive, so that they can answer, or they can ask another follow-up question that gets closer and closer to the core, right? I mean, it may not
Right.
be an answer. I mean, that's the thing, is you're asking questions not necessarily to get answers. You're asking questions kind of in a Socratic method of making people think about things, right?
Right.
Uh,
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it is. And I like what you bring up, in that is that that a lot of times people may ask questions, but the key, right, is to listen to the answer.
there's a lot of people, right? And I do it too. People just, I mean, there's a lot of people ask questions because they think because they want to hear an answer, or they want to get to an answer that they've already kind of decided,
Right.
right? Or there's
Right.
people that ask questions to make themselves look smart, or
Right.
there's people that ask questions to put people on the spot, you know, um, all of which I guess at some certain times serve a function, but are nowhere near as powerful as kind of asking the questions that make everybody in the room think. Whether
Right.
it's one person or a group of people, think. Um, and then the other thing you mentioned, which we can come back to the questions. The other thing you mentioned is asking for help, And I think that's essential too. There's a lot of people who try to, that go it alone.
Mm,
And that can be when you're starting a business and you're
yep.
solo, or that can
Yep.
be when you're within a larger organization and you're just like, I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of pressure, societal pressure of like being able to do things or being able to accomplish whatever. And so a lot of people see that as I've got to do it and I've got to have my name on it, and I think
Well, and I think that it's perceived as, in some cases
like a
as
weakness.
a weakness.
Mhm.
Yeah, which is, it couldn't be further from the
No,
truth.
no,
I mean, I
no. And
think
I think that's
it's
hard for everybody.
actually the reverse, that
No,
it's the people who are, the people who are willing to ask for help. I really admire them.
yeah. I think, and I mean, that's actually something that is an area that I personally, would like to work harder on. I think that, the one of the things that helps you ask for help is when you have very good self-knowledge, or high self-awareness. And that allows you to say, like, either this is something I don't like to do, I'm going to ask
Hmm.
somebody else to do it. This is something that I'm not good at, I'm going to ask for somebody's help. This is
Hmm.
something that I'm unsure of, I want somebody else's opinion. But
Hmm.
you have to be ready to, when you ask for help, you have to be ready for the help that is offered, or for the help not to be offered. And sometimes that can be scary in and of
Oh,
itself.
and absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. And it's, it is yeah, it is that self-awareness. I agree with you. And and I guess, it gets down to the essence of it, is that there is a level of vulnerability
Sure.
that comes with asking for help. So, well, that
Oh, you're
could,
not going to go into the whole Brene Brown vulnerability thing now, are you?
well, you know what? The one thing that I do, I was thinking about this today because I had an earlier conversation and we were talking about teams.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I am a little bit late to the party with Brene Brown. I know that she's, wildly famous, and people adore her. And in fact, I have a colleague, one of my team member, who's, has traveled to go see her when that was a thing. But I listened to a really great interview with her. And one of the things that she said that she and her spouse do, that I thought, gosh, this is so applicable to a business environment, and that um, she and her spouse will check in with each other, maybe, I don't know what the format is, but let's just say at the beginning of the week or Sunday night or whatever, and kind of say, what does our week look like? And
Mhm.
and they kind of take note of, is it one of those weeks where you've got lots of meetings and you're running here and there and whatnot? And then they'll kind of check in with each other during the course of the week. And basically what it's doing is they make the assumption that, their family unit works when they together somehow are operating at 100%. But
Mhm.
what they do by checking in with each other is they acknowledge when one of them may be not at 50 and the other one and they'll say, hey, gosh, I'm super exhausted, or I'm just really stressed out, and I'm kind of I'm at like 35% right now. Like, do you have me? Like, do you have the deficit? Can you spot me here? And sometimes the other person will say, absolutely, like, I've got you, we are 100% together. And other times the other person may say, holy cow, I just was going to come to you, and I am running at about 40%, and I need a little boost here. And then they work together to see, okay, who else can they bring in to, is it a matter of asking someone else to pick up the kids, or, they'd get takeout food, or, how do you make up for that? Where do you look for other bits to make up the rest of, so that you can get back to that 100%? And I thought, gosh, that I feel like that has some value in a team situation where if you were working on a certain project or whatnot. But I don't know.
No, well, sure. I mean, if you break that down, right? So part of it is a little bit of is planning. What do you got going on this week? You know, what's
Right.
on your schedule, right? And another big piece of it, and there's obviously some self awareness or self knowledge in there of when you're feeling overwhelmed, or when you're, you know, when you need to ask for help, or when you feel, you know, like you're getting underwater. But I mean, the key thing I think in there is communication, right? You got to communicate what your schedule is. You got to communicate when you are, you know, running at optimal level or
Right.
running at subpar level. And you got to continue to do that, right? So, I mean, communication is a huge
Yeah.
key in, you know, in relationships as well as in business. And when you don't have that, you know, um, that's where you have like decisions being made by people that affect other people, but they don't know about them, right? And
Right.
or you have or you have people working on the same thing, you know, or people working at cross purposes, and that happens at home too. You know, I'll admit, you know. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds, at least to me, like that. For me, that would be my big takeaway from that, is like they sound like they've got great communication. They've built it into a system of kind of like, we're going to check in and do this and that and talk about, you know, how we feel or our feelings or whatever. But that's key, you know, at least that's my takeaway from.
Well, I must love it because I love systems. So that must be part of the reason why I was like, oh God, I think this sounds fabulous. Well, so let me ask you my follow-up question to the resilience piece, and we've talked a bit about it, but is the concept of failure. Like, what does failure mean to you?
I mean, failure is giving up. Failure is not failure, right? I mean, there's I wish I'd memorized it before the call. I mean, there's a Japanese saying, and it basically, I don't remember how to say it in Japanese, but it's basically fall down 8 times, get up 9, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, you're going to run into brick walls. You're going to fail. I mean, in fact, right, a lot of people argue that if you're not failing, you're not stressing, you're not pushing yourself, you're not
Right.
stretching yourself. I mean, certainly in a sporting activity standpoint, that's all you do when you start out, you know. In fact, I'm having that problem with my daughter right now. Is my wife and I feel that she is afraid. She doesn't like some things that she's not really good at. So to
Mm-hmm.
me, that means she doesn't like being a beginner at some things, or she doesn't like failing at those. You know, she'd rather do something that she feels more confident in. So I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if it's a confidence issue or what, but um, no, I mean, failure is really giving up, I
Yeah.
guess. I mean, I have to think about, I mean, you know, which is a choice, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not a, I mean, in most cases, I mean, failure is I mean, that's a choice. The actual act of failure is kind of somewhat out of your control, you
Yeah.
know? And, you know, I guess the real failure is like not learning from your failure, you know,
Right.
is not growing. I mean, I think, you know, you cannot grow without failure. I mean, um, I used to think I had this I had this moment of clarity when my daughter, my firstborn, was probably like, I don't even know how old, several months old, or maybe 7 months old. I don't even remember now, like at what age kids like they can't crawl, but they just kind of pick their head up off the floor. And I was sitting on my couch drinking a beer. I was tired. It was night, and this kid was on the carpet, like just trying to pick her head up, right? Trying to pick her head up. And all she was doing, pick her head up, which was like half of her body weight, you know, and then it would go back down. And I thought about it, and I'm like, oh my God. And then she would fall asleep for like 20 minutes, right? Because it's tiring. And then she'd wake up and start doing it again. And I thought to myself, she's like, I'm sitting on the couch drinking a beer, all right, watching TV. I mean, I might
Right.
as well have been eating bonbons at the same time. And and she's spending every waking moment of her life trying to improve herself. And I'm like, when did I go from that to this? No, and I think about it a lot. And so,
Yeah,
you know, so I
no, I
think
mean,
about it a lot.
I'm laughing, but I
Right.
totally relate to what you're
Yeah. So
saying.
she just kept on failing, but didn't give up. I mean,
Yeah.
she couldn't get that head up, you know, and ultimately, right? I mean, now she can get her head up off the carpet, right? And then
Right.
and hopefully she doesn't just take that arc all the way to just sitting on the couch, you know, drinking beer and watching television. But, you know, so, you know, are you constantly, you know, I mean, from a, you know, look at it from a business standpoint. Are you constantly improving? I mean, they're always talking, constant improvement. Are you constantly going through, your structure and trying to make it better or faster or easier or cheaper? I think it's important in life too, is like, are you growing? Is really
Yeah.
what it is are you growing? I mean, are you improving yourself? I mean, you don't have to be, getting physically stronger or getting smarter or whatever, but are you improving yourself in some way? And I think you see that also in, when you get to, some people get to a certain age where they back to the failure is giving up. They either
Yeah.
give up or they don't want to do that. And it can be, you can make minuscule improvements, so you can have something that you're getting enjoyment out of. So I don't know. That's
Well,
sort
I
of,
see the way that I see that, it really leads to the other question that I was going to ask you, which is I see that directly related to being curious.
yeah,
Like, I think that remaining curious is something that just serves me. It serves me so well in my professional life, my personal life, my relationship with my kids, just and so how do you, you know is curiosity a part of kind of your practice, and how do you remain curious?
yeah. It's actually, I actually need to rein it in a little bit because I have a lot of interest. I mean, I'm interested in a lot of things, and so I think it's harder for me sometimes to focus on, I'm kind of jack of all trades, master of none. And so I enjoy doing different things. I don't like going to the same restaurant all the time. I want to try new things. So, I mean, that factors in a big way, I think, in my life. And I think it shows in kind of a, disparate group of friends that I have, or not disparate, but I mean, I have a very broad group of friends with a lot of different interests. Um, and I think I think that for me, at least, it's something that I think is enriching in life. I mean, there's so much to know and learn. You can't possibly jam it all into your head in one lifetime. Um, but I remember seeing my grandparents. I remember how good my grandfather was. He was a salesman, I mean, in his former life, but I remember going out to dinner and that with him. And he was always asking, he was always asking the servers all kinds of questions, and
Mhm.
part of it was small talk, but he was actually interested in them,
Yeah.
and that's part of, that's part of curiosity, I guess, too, is are you
Yeah.
interested in things, or more importantly, people? Are you
Mhm.
really interested in people? And so, no, I think that's, I think curious people are the ones that figure stuff out. I don't think you can get to a certain level of expertise in anything, without being curious, whether it's how to, fix how to solve a virus issue, or
Yeah.
how to take people to the next level as a coach, or how to build a business, or being an artist, curiosity, exploring new realms. So no, I think it's really essential. And it's especially essential, I think, in the creative aspects of life. Because you just can't
Yeah.
get there without being creative. You might be smart enough to see it business wise, to see an issue that you see a solution that other people don't. But I think I don't think you can create something, without kind of being curious. So
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you, because I do, I love having that conversation with clients around, how to be more creative, or how to encourage more creativity within your team or your organization. And when I'm talking about creativity, I'm sometimes there's that I think it's less so now, but there's there used to be more of that knee jerk reaction of I'm not creative. And it's like, well, no, you may not be artistic, but you are creative, because you are, you solve problems. That's what creativity is. And it was just shared with me last week that really the importance of imagination, um, as so even maybe that having an active imagination is the precursor to creativity in some ways. So with that, one way I think of myself is that I grew up reading a lot and being read to. And so I always like to ask my guests, what was a book that you can remember when you were little that or younger that either was read to you or that you read to yourself and had kind of a significant impact?
God, I'm trying to think. Well, so I mean, I went through all like the Tarzan books, as like the series when I was probably, whenever that was, junior high or something like that. I went into kind of a whole science fiction, nonfiction, thing. Early on, so my dad used to recite The Cremation of Sam McGee, which is a Robert Service poem. I don't know if you know either the poem or the author. He used to recite that to us when we went to bed, which is kind of a creepy way to go to bed.
Well, your dad did have a sense of humor.
But he had it, yeah. So it was a little odd. I mean, looking back at it now, I'm sure there's some psychologist who'd love to like talk to me about that. But that was and my grandmother used to write, my great grandmother used to write poetry, and so my dad would like kind of read us some of these. It was his grandmother who'd read us some of these poems, some of which she had written about him and his brother.
Oh.
And especially when you're young, like poetry, because of the words and kind of the rhyming in that and the cadence of it, kind of take on its own form. And so I loved and I still do love the poem, Cremation of Sam McGee.
Yeah.
And just both because of the story, but also because of the memory it brings back. So that was, I guess, instrumental, and maybe not a good way, but I'm not sure. That's
well, for those of us, for people out there who are not familiar with the story, what's just a quick synopsis of the.
Well, it starts there. Strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. So basically, it's about two guys in the Yukon looking for gold, and one of them is dying, is freezing to death, and asks the guy that he's with, he said, I'm going to die, and I want you to cremate me because I don't want to be like a big frozen stiff. So that's the whole poem, is this guy dying and then riding, taking his dog sled with this stiff frozen guy with him until he shoves him into an oven and, cremates him. I mean, and I'm actually being nice the way I'm describing it. I mean, it's an odd.
Oh no, I love it. I mean, I grew up, my grandmother loved horror movies and scary stories. So I love it. I love that stuff. I still read stuff that, I love all kind of mysteries.
I loved like Encyclopedia Browne, who was this guy who was always figuring out, the stuff. I was never a big fan of like the Hardy Boys or that, but I read this series of books called The Great Brain, which was about this guy who basically would figure out how to swindle all the grown-ups and stuff. He was like a really, kind of conniving / tricky kid, so some of these were, Encyclopedia Browne was he was a problem solver basically. I like stories about young whippersnappers who kind of knew their stuff. So those, that at a young age, that's what I liked. I don't really remember. There wasn't like one book that I read over and over again or was read to over and over again, but.
Oh, I love that. Well, it definitely seems to have informed somewhat your professional life these days. The problem solving, the, getting in there and kind of being the young whippersnapper in the organization that figures things out.
Well, I hope so. I think that, ultimately, I think that that's what, it's what I actually enjoy. And I think that that's what, a lot of companies, their mission is in a way, is they're trying to, whether you call it solving problems or, improving somebody's life or that. But yeah, I mean, that's what I've spent most of my time over the last, 15 plus years doing, is kind of identifying the problems that are key to solve, because there's always lots of problems to solve, and then trying
Right.
to, trying to address those, and sometimes in a creative way, so.
So what was your very first job as a kid, or paid anything that the first time that somebody actually, there was an exchange of money for a task or a job that you did?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so my father had a business, much what my family still has. And a lot of it was assembly work of kind of electronic components. I used to make those, like, we had home workers. In fact, we still do, although now they're classified a little differently than they were then. But I used to make those parts, and I got paid on a per piece rate, of however many I made. And so, I mean, it was my dad paying me cash out of his pocket. And I was pretty young. Probably shouldn't say how young, so that we don't.
I think the
limitations has passed.
yeah, exactly.
But so it was, and so it was putting together, it literally was putting together parts, and being paid for like a box of, I mean, like 1,000 plus parts that I put together. But that was as that was as a little kid. I mean, I didn't have a paper route, or anything, but that was kind of the age that I was at the time.
Oh, interesting. I love it.
I mean, it got to the point where, you were doing so many of them that, like, when the color changed, like, you're like, oh, now I get to do green ones. Like, that was exciting. So, I think a little bit of it was a lesson that, like, you probably want to do something, you probably want to go through school and do something so that you're not stuck putting parts together.
Yeah. So that you have some choices, some options.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I love that. Well, the other thing that I like to explore is people's bright spots and blind spots, so to speak. And so one of the questions I always ask is when, if I were to kind of survey a group of your colleagues and your friends, family, whatever, like, what is a trait that they would maybe all agree on? Oh, Phelps he's so good at this.
I think probably kind of taking the problem, or taking the issue at hand, backing up, kind of really thinking about it, and kind of coming at it from a bunch of different angles. I think I'm pretty good, and I think they would say I'm pretty good at seeing the problems, or the issue at hand, from a bunch of different perspectives, and then kind of zeroing in on the options, and the impact on this. I mean, that may sound very vague, but I mean, I worked with a family business that was owned by several families, including my own. And I was on the board, but I was also the president of it. My family was a major shareholder, so I was an owner. And so there's a lot of hats that you're wearing, and there's a lot of constituents, that are different. So what may be best for the president is not necessarily best for the board, and what's best for the board is not necessarily best for the owners, and so it makes some of the decisions difficult to make. But when you can kind of look at them a little bit, from some different angles, and kind of understand the different perspectives, I think it gives you a clearer view of the options which I think ultimately is kind of what you want. Is I want to know what my options are, and then I'll weigh the options and prioritize them and figure out what makes sense. So I don't know if I've answered.
Yeah, that does. And then I guess conversely, maybe
now you're gearing up to ask me what they'd say I'm bad at.
No. I was just going to ask you what might be a trait that is less obvious to folks who work with you, or who have served on a board. Like, what's maybe a hidden talent, so to speak, that you have?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I try to promote my talents, but a hidden talent, or a lesser known, or lesser talent, or a lesser known talent. I don't know.
Well, are there any, if not, and I don't necessarily think of blind spots as necessarily always negative. I think that blind spots can actually assist us at times.
Mhm.
So, is there a blind spot that you used to have that you're more that you kind of came to gain some awareness around that over the course of your career?
Well, I mean, I think one, I do like people, and I think I'm empathetic to, people's causes and people in general. And I think that, one of the things that I probably didn't do as well on earlier in my career and may not still be as good at now is kind of making tough decisions. Kind of often some tough decisions need to be made and need to be made quickly and moved on from. And
Hmm.
when you don't, when you kind of go halfway or try to make it easier on people, sometimes it just makes it a longer, more drawn out, pronounced
Yeah.
kind of exit. Or exit may not be the right term, but solution,
Right. Right.
Um, so and that's something probably I still need to work on. Um, and knowing when to knowing when to make kind of a cut and dry,
Hmm.
decision on that, and when not to is the thing that I think you just learn over time making those. um,
Oh, yeah. And
yeah,
I mean, I don't, I think it, especially, when you are someone like yourself who cares about people, I don't think that it,
but sometimes it's better to be straightforward.
oh my gosh, I think,
And
well, that's what I was
and
going to
that's what
say is that I
is that
think you learn, it doesn't become any easier
right.
in some ways to do the thing that has to be done, but what does become
Yeah.
easier that
It doesn't mean you're
you,
any less caring
yeah, but you
sometimes,
realize that
but
it's better to do it pretty clean.
and often the
Yeah.
most caring thing to do is to be very straightforward and upfront about it.
Yeah.
Whether it's relationships or personal relationships or
Yeah.
work relationships, right? So
Yeah, for sure. Well, it has there been, since we are in this very kind of unusual and different time of being sheltering in place or lockdown or quarantine or what have you, where so many of us were working from home, or just working in a different way. You've got young kids. Um, has there been kind of a is there something that you can share with us that you have adopted as a simple kind of habit, that you incorporated to help during this time for you to be kind of more focused or remain kind of on point?
yeah. So I've always kind of written. I wrote a lot when I traveled a lot when I was younger, or kind of college, out of college, and I always kept kind of travel journals. And then I kind of kept that on even after I wasn't really traveling, although I didn't really write as much, And so I tried to actually really. I didn't start it back up, but I tried to do that on a more regular basis
Mhm.
when the pandemic hit. I also figured, not that anybody's ever going to read any of these things, but I thought that other than maybe my kids or something, but I thought this was, such an odd time that
Mhm.
I've always found, that putting words down on paper helps me.
Mhm.
And so it helps make things a little more clear to me.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that I've tried to do more of. And I've kind of been doing it actually online now through something more recently. So that's something that again, I wish I'd say I was doing it every single day, but I'm not. But the
Yeah.
other thing, I will say that the other thing that I've been doing as well, which I had done a little bit of before, is spending more time kind of meditating. Um,
Mhm.
and I don't know that I use some different apps, for that. And I've found that that's been, also really helpful, whether it's something that where I'm trying to get focus on something, or whether it's something because I'm, freaking out about something, or I'm like overloaded on the home front with everything that's going on. And that's been helpful too. So the kind of that and writing is really helpful. I also,
Well, in some ways they're kind of the same thing, right? Just
They
I
are,
mean,
yeah. I think they're. I mean, they're certainly trying to go to the same place, but maybe
yeah.
path for certain. You know, for sure.
Well, I am a huge believer in meditating, and I attribute this. I feel like I read somewhere in some interview that Deepak Chopra was doing where, he's like, well, was being asked by the interviewer, well, how do you, what would you say to someone who is, knows that they've got a really busy day coming up, and they're really stressed out and this, that, and the other. And he's like, well, I'd, and kind of I guess the gist of the question was like, how do you fit that in or whatever, to meditate. And he said, well, I'd suggest that he'd meditate even longer on that day, and meditate more on that day. And I always think about that on those days when I'm thinking, oh gosh, this is going to be one of those crazy days, and da 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 da. And I'm like, oh, okay, what would Deepak do? Well, he would he would he would meditate for longer. And there is some I don't know, there is some real truth to that. So it always makes me laugh. Well, what so in terms of your work with the different companies,
Right.
it could even be with the nonprofits that you work with, is what do you think, what do you kind of, is there something that employers or management, or the C-suite, or whomever, is there something that you consistently see that they miss when they are looking to grow an organization, and also get kind of greater productivity or more employee engagement?
Are you talking about nonprofits only,
Just
or
no,
across
no,
the
no.
board?
Just your experience with the different organizations that you've worked with. Do you see something that consistently employers tend to miss?
I mean, not consistently. I think you consistently see successful organizations, whatever they, nonprofit or business, for-profit businesses. I think you see things that successful organizations do, and you see some of those things lacking in unsuccessful organizations or not as successful organizations. And I think that one of the key things is just really is very, very explicit goal setting. I mean, high level goal of who we are, what we do, why we do it, and having that disseminated all the way down through the organization so that everybody can kind of repeat that mantra, and then sticking to it, right? I mean, you can't just have your mantra and then not kind of fulfill what you're saying you do. But I think that, I mean, ultimately, there's a lot of organizations where if you ask 5 different people, what do you do? Not you personally, but what does your company do? You get
Right.
5 different answers, and you might get 5 very, very, very different answers, And I think it's especially true, or unfortunately, especially found in a lot of nonprofits, and more because the goal is usually pretty clear, but or at least, who they're serving, they say is clear, but how they serve those people and actually who they serve at the end of the day is not always that clear. I mean, they think of, I'm delivering, I mean, if it's, services.
Or it could be Meals on Wheels.
For the homeless, then I'm helping the homeless, but
right.
they forget that their constituencies are, their constituents are the donors that are giving to them, that there's a lot of other people involved. And so, sometimes, laser focus on one thing ends up meaning that you leave all these other things out. I think that goal setting is key, and then understanding, how you build around that and meet those things are key. And I think that good organizations do that well, and poor organizations don't. And some organizations don't do any of it at all.
Yeah.
I mean, you can succeed without it if you just have a great product or a great service. But you won't kind of get as far, and I mean, I guess it's part of kind of the soul searching thing too, of like, what are we doing? You know, how am I, you know, either returning value or what's my purpose or, you know,
Yeah.
and I think it really, I think it helps the organization because it keeps people focused, but I also think it helps individuals within the organization because
Yes.
they feel like they're part of something bigger. And
Yeah.
therefore they are something, you know, and they understand that some of these things that are asked of them to do may
Right.
seem menial at the time, but when you can explain, no, this means this, and that translates into this, and it serves our customers or serves this purpose doing that, it's it then there's a lot more buy-in from
Yes.
people and a
Oh,
lot more understanding of
absolutely.
kind of how my job is important, you know.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
like I mean, I was never in the military, but like, I think the military does that really well, right? I mean, when it's functioning well, they do that, you know, that you're part of a team, you're part of a group, your job is to do this. You've got to do that really well because these other people are relying on you and they're
Right.
actually relying on you like with their life,
With
right?
their
It's not
life.
like
Yeah.
you didn't ship the product or you didn't, you know, you didn't get this guy's insurance quote out to him. It's, you know, it's life or death. And so that's why I think a lot of people recruit, you know, specifically they recruit people from the military because they understand kind of how to work in a team, how to stay kind of mission focused, you know, all those kinds
Hmm.
of things, which are now like
Absolutely.
buzzwords in like normal corporate America, right? But like kind of
Yeah.
came out of, you know, out of a totally different, you know, environment.
Right. Exactly. Well, thank you so much for your time. And it's been such a pleasure to hear your thoughts and be well.
Yeah. Well, thanks. You too. I appreciate the time.
Take care.
All right.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Our goal is to inspire others and share stories to find meaning in your daily life. Let go of the traditional norms and be yourself at home, work, and beyond. The awareness of bright spots and blind spots is a performance enhancing tool that you can apply to your life and to your organization today.